Hey, an expedited business pants. Right at it.
All right,
Monday, February 3rd, 2020. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to make some announcements right at the top here.
Yeah, go.
You're listening to Business Pants. We are Free Float Media. I'm Matt Moscardi. That is Damian Rollis. I would like to announce right now, we have gotten some sage advice from a good friend of mine, a friend and neighbor, to improve the show. We've been asking some of you what you think. So here's what we're going to do. Okay?
Someone who's quite knowledgeable, too, I might add.
Yeah. This is not some schmo. This isn't like, I didn't ask my kids. I did ask my kids. They're useless. But here's what we're going to do.
Okay, just get to what we're doing.
So this show has been running 4 days a week. We are going to make this show actually run 3 days a week. You will get Business Pants 3 days a week. You will get it Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Okay? So if you love this show, you will still get so much of it, you can't stop. We are going to shorten the show and focus on 1 to 2 big stories a day, and then some headlines at the end of the day, things that we're just watching. We're going to dispense with some things that we've been doing, including Matt Makes, which is its own segment and it's fun, and maybe we'll bring it back, but we're going to embed it into the show instead. Instead, if you are one of our ESG people, we are going to do a Tuesday show every single week called The Market Medium.
Oh, a new name. Okay.
The Market Medium. So Business Pants will continue to run. It will be your show for, snarky fact-based business news, like news for humans, business news that doesn't suck, all those things that we've been. The Market Medium will be your ESG, stakeholder capitalism, news, interviews. It's serious things for serious people. Okay. And that will run on, we will record that on Tuesdays. So every week you'll get ESG related news. And then every couple of weeks, we will drop in interviews with thought leaders and smart people in the ESG world, talking about ESG-ish stuff, governance-y stuff, but really smart people who we think are interesting. We're going to bring in some other people. We'll have conversations, but it will be almost all like stakeholder ESG related for the time being. We're going to separate that out. Okay. The Market Medium.
Market Medium. Can I just say quickly that I'm not offended, even though I'm the one who runs this particular show. I'm not offended that this show is not being considered serious by you, Matt Moscardi. I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah, we are not. I mean, it's going to be hard to be serious in a serious show because we are not serious people.
No, we'll be serious. We'll be serious.
So with that said, and we need you to go subscribe to the Market Medium. We are going to start it this week, but subscribe to Business Pants. We need you to share these things with your friends because I'm hungry. And with that all said, what do we got on today's Business Pants agenda?
I think by far the two biggest stories we're covering are the coronavirus, unfortunately, and the Super Bowl, Matt. The American Super Bowl. That's it.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, as you said, we'll end with some headlines, some other things we're looking at.
All right. Well, let's do it. Let's just do this. Oh, wait. We have our new, block music, right?
New harp.
It's not a harp. Ready?
Okay, well, it's still, it's still a harp.
I can bring the harp back.
Can I say I've been sick since like last Thursday, and that's the sound I've been hearing in my head. Is that whatever you just played? All right, coronavirus. Yeah, we got to talk about it. The fast-spreading coronavirus is nearing pandemic status, Matt, even as a top World Health Organization official warns that the world may be dangerously unprepared for a pandemic. So the confirmed cases in China up to about 17,000, deaths over 360. The Philippines reported the first death outside of China. But I do want to keep this in perspective. This flu season alone in the United States has sickened at least 19 million, led to 10,000 deaths and 180,000 hospitalizations. What else is going on with coronavirus? China is accusing the U.S. of spreading fear and panic. They're saying it's unreasonable for countries around the world to try to prevent people from crossing borders. investors erased $400 billion from
Have they
China's.
met the Trump administration? That's basically their platform they ran on.
So $400 billion has left the Chinese stock market, marking the biggest plunge in over 4 years. 2/3 of China's economy remains closed. They call it, you know what? The coronavirus is forcing the world's largest work from home experiment. How about that, Matt? No, really. I mean, there might be a lot of weird lessons learned from this experience. And the last thing I'm going to say is that Facebook, because we
Oh,
love Facebook, Facebook says it will start removing misinformation about the coronavirus outbreak. So this they deem
oh.
worthy of this they deem worthy of correcting. But
So, so the global pandemic is has a status somewhere above electing officials to run the globe.
pandemics, yeah, who deal with
Nice.
pandemic,
Well,
yeah.
it's good to know where we rank.
So that's a lot of stuff there for you, man. Where do you want to? Any area you want to focus in on?
So I want to. I think a lot of the business news sort of angle around this because it's earnings season right now. So
Yeah,
companies are all coming out with like their fourth quarter earnings, which are very highly anticipated to see how they did for the year. Because if you didn't know, in business cycles, everything actually looks backwards. So coronavirus has actually been on a whole bunch of earnings calls already. Apple had to close 42 stores. There's some analysts who are saying that iPhone shipments are likely to get cut by as much as 10%. Starbucks closed more than half of its Chinese locations as of its earnings call. I think it's closing even more now.
sure.
McDonald's said McDonald's CEO said this was, quote, concerning.
Okay.
Deep, heartfelt feeling about coronavirus. They
Yeah.
closed all their restaurants in Hubei province, but he was very quick to say that this is only about, quote, 3% of income and that its actual impact on our business is going to be fairly small, assuming, again, that it stays contained to China, which at the time of the earnings call was already not true.
Okay.
But then there's all these other companies. A.O. Smith said our supply chain, we see no issues. Crane and Company said it's a broader supply chain issue. So it's like companies are all kind of like wrestling with how to talk about coronavirus. My favorite is actually United Technologies, a business roundtable company. So all about the stakeholders, right?
Right.
They basically said they looked back and they compared it to SARS, and they said there was basically only a 6-month impact overall, and that there are two major differences today. One is airlines are a hell of a lot healthier than they were in 2003, and number two is that they were coming off 9/11. So no mention of the fact that United Technologies people might get coronavirus.
Yeah.
Very, very focused on the fact that SARS was fine, so we don't really care. So there are 4 things that I want to talk to you about, and I'm curious what you think about these things.
Yeah.
The first is coronavirus seems very clearly to be reaffirming the fact that supply chains are full of humans, right? Like,
yes.
Like all these businesses who have been talking about it, Apple, Starbucks, McDonald's, United Technologies. I mean, they're all kind of like ignoring. Very few of them. Starbucks CEO did bring up, worried about the people, but very few of them kind of like talk about their supply chain like there are humans in it. They sort of.
Well, this is a problem in general. I think even that term supply chains is dehumanizing. I don't think your average person or listener or whoever, I don't think they even really have a firm grasp of what the supply chain is. I'm just really, I don't.
I think that's right. I mean, I think you only think of it when. I think people think of the supply chain when they think of like child labor and they think of, making, sweatshops. That's when they are aware of a supply chain. But the supply chain are the people who actually build the parts that the companies end up selling to you, right? Like when you buy an iPhone, almost all of those parts, something like 80% of those parts come from China or are built in China. And
Right.
you just ignore that, except when it's like manufacturing, talking about like, the loss of manufacturing in the United States because of China. But China
But
is,
even then, I don't think people put those things together.
but I think
I
it's
don't.
just full of
They're not able
people.
to connect the dots on these things.
So I mean, I did a quick
Yeah.
poll,
Okay.
and
Matt connected the dots.
so
Yeah.
I connected a dot, I would say.
Okay.
I did a really quick poll, and I looked
Yeah.
at countries by infectious disease mortality rates. So these are countries where infectious disease is an existing problem, and that's like not genetic diseases. It's communicable diseases
Okay.
against major manufacturing. So
Yeah.
so there are all these countries that we get our shit from: Indonesia, China, Mexico, India, Brazil, that have higher than average infectious disease rates,
Hmm.
which is kind of like, it's baffling to me that business sort of ignores that humans are there, right? Like, it's kind of like, okay, it's cheap
Yeah.
labor in India and China. That's why they go. But
I
then,
mean, this has always been one of the problems I think of the Western world is how they sort of measure up the rest of the world. This has been going on for centuries.
you think about it, and it's like, because these are human beings, until the robots take over everything, right?
Mhm.
These are still human beings, and you have this kind of like Foxconn problem where like these companies think, well, they're cheap and therefore we can pay them cheaply and we don't really have to care. I don't think that's an explicit thing that a company says, but they very clearly don't
Well,
offer the same level of care to their suppliers as they do. Like, that's not as much a thing to them. They just
I mean,
don't want sweatshop labor.
I gotta say it's an interesting point you raised because I think one of the more racist ways that we see Asian cultures is to refer to them as sort of robotic, right? As kind of they're clone-like, and so I mean, I wonder if these things are connected somehow.
Well, I did poll alongside this that
Yeah.
there are 37 like multinational companies that have been flagged in the last 3 years, according to MSCI ESG data, which I
Right.
borrowed from a friend, um,
Sure.
uh,
Yeah.
who have been flagged for labor problems in their supply chain. And I think that number is probably low. It's probably much higher than that. But these are
Okay.
things like they did use child labor, or their workers are striking, or they basically took advantage of their workers somehow. And
Hmm.
it's sort of like, if labor is a fungible asset to a company, then isn't health and humanity they also view as sort of fungible too, right? Isn't that's the connection here to me that seems to be lost in the coronavirus conversation. In the business news, where all they're talking about is like, we had to close some stores, we're worried about earnings. Like, are you kidding me? How about being worried about your supply chain staff dropping dead? How about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're opening up a big bag there, as I think I think the reason why that supply chain exists in the first place is answering some of those questions, right? I mean, yeah. This is some deep shit, Matt.
Well, which brings me to number 2, and this is a
Yeah.
market conversation, okay?
All
the
right.
the market is basically driven by fear and greed. Like, we know this, that humanity is basically driven by those things. Humanity is also driven by sex, I would say, but fear and greed for the most part. So there's a bunch of market narratives out there right now, which we haven't mentioned much here yet. But like, I read 3M's. They made a statement saying they are currently putting, quote, all its efforts into organizing the manufacturing of face masks.
Hmm.
Their shares were up. Jim Cramer talked about Clorox, which is a Procter and Gamble company, being a smart play. Like, buy into Procter and Gamble because everybody's going to want to wipe their countertops.
Yeah.
In fact, I just saw an analyst from, I think it was Goldman, but I'm not sure, saying Nike is now it's a good opportunity to buy cheap because as their supply chain closes because their people are dying,
Yeah.
the stock is down. Buy Nike because people are going to need shoes
Yes.
when this
Right.
is over. It is a really, really weird, like, theory hedgy thing that happens.
Not not to mention that there have been multiple reports that the face masks are essentially useless, and that the hand sanitizers, they're cleaning your counters with that crap is probably not going to help anyway. So there
Like
you
it's a
go.
weird stock market bump, a very, very short term weird stock market bump for profiteering off of the fact that people are afraid they might die from a deadly pandemic.
Oh, come
Like,
on.
doesn't that make you?
All right.
The whole thing makes you
All right, let's
squirmy.
wrap this up. What else you got?
Okay,
You
so
done?
which brings me to the solutions
Yeah.
part of this
Okay.
conversation.
Good. Good. Yeah.
Um, so, um, it doesn't get better.
Okay.
Because solutions, the market doesn't actually incentivize solutions. So I talked to friend of the show, Julia from MSCI ESG. Julia is amazing. So I called her and asked, we were talking about this. And she basically said she wouldn't be surprised if there was a short-term bump, but the pharmaceutical companies who are supposed to solve this problem, the large ones, really have no incentive to do it. Like zero incentive.
That's serving.
Because
Okay.
it's really expensive to develop a drug for a short-term problem. So they focus more on like long-term problems where they can more likely recoup any R&D spend. So she basically said it's bit players that if you're lucky, a bit player will solve it. So right now in market,
Does anybody want to be a hero?
I guess they don't play hero ball.
Right.
I mean, I guess good for them for the long term, but
They play long-term addiction games.
they're all, I mean, like, it is ironic that it's like the opioids have take a front seat to, solving a pandemic right now in market. In fact, what some of the drug players are doing, I'm seeing Gilead Sciences actually has this drug that failed to solve the Ebola epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
But now they're testing it for people with coronavirus, and they're seeing some success.
Okay.
So I don't know how that makes me feel about taking a drug. Like, wow, this was shitty for some other pandemic, but let's just chuck it at some people for this pandemic. But I guess that's how drug manufacturing works. I guess the point of that is your
Yes.
big players are actually not going to solve your problem. You have to beg and pray that the 40% of the biotech market and the pharma market that are small, like less than 10 billion in market cap, who spend, a lot on R&D, one of them basically has to have a inspiration and get out to market fast. So finally, if you're counting on AbbVie, Amgen, Johnson & Johnson, Novartis, if the companies you're counting on to do this, if that's who you're counting on, Julia's point was you're probably counting on the wrong companies. And I looked at all the big companies, and it struck me that the companies who will save us are also full of people that we seem to care more about, mostly because they're white and male. They have incentives too. And the companies I'm listing right now, just to tie a nice little bow on the coronavirus, because I can go from coronavirus to cronyism in one step. AbbVie, Ed Liddy, my favorite Boeing board member, on the board of AbbVie. Amgen, Robert Bradway, CEO of Amgen, a major pharmaceutical company who could solve the corona problem, maybe, I don't know, is a Boeing board member. Johnson & Johnson's CEO Alex Gorsky sits on the Business Roundtable board. He's also a Duberstein client, alongside Duberstein being the architect of the Boeing board, alongside Novartis and Duberstein client Pharmaceutical Manufacturers of America. We talk a lot about boards here, and we don't think about a board when you think about a global pandemic, but boards create the incentives for the companies to do things. The boards are full of people and their friends. The incentives don't align for those boards to ask their companies to think about solving big social problems. So Business Roundtable, you want to talk about stakeholder capitalism? Why don't you start with your own board and the stakeholders that you could save from a global pandemic? That's where I want to end this.
Yeah, and this is why, we talk a lot about diversity on boards, is because we just simply need as many different perspectives to handle crises like this as possible. It's that simple. We don't need the same type trying to solve all the world's problems, right? We just need a lot of different ideas.
Can I just say how frightening it is that I can go from coronavirus to Boeing in like one
It is
step?
kind of sad, but it doesn't. Unfortunately. All right, let's come on.
You basically have Boeing running your coronavirus.
You forgot to say at the top of the show, Matt, that we're trying to keep these shows roughly to about 25 minutes.
Yeah, we're closing in.
And you already filibustered us through the coronavirus.
Let's do the next segment quick.
I'm gonna buy a Flavor Flav clock for you and put it around your neck so you learn how to wrap things up a little bit. But I like it. Thanks. Let's go quickly to the Super Bowl. We're gonna look at it from a business pants perspective. Let's look at the Super Bowl from three main areas of concentration, Matt. And we're really kind of talking about Super Bowl ads, but we can talk about the Super Bowl in general. But here are the three main areas of concentration: women, big data, and the streaming wars.
Ooh.
Where do you want to start?
Women, obviously.
So, according to the NFL, and this one, it seems a little dubious to me, but women are watching the NFL in record numbers. Of 187 million fans, 47% are women. Do you believe that?
I mean, I don't not believe it.
So here's what they get out of this is, I guess the good part is that the halftime show consisted of women, so that's good, I guess. There was the first ever female coach.
The first ever female coach is cool.
And there were two female-centric ads out of probably 800 ads. So there you go.
Progress. Does sound like a corporate board.
We see a lot of negative shit in this show. So I just want to say two positive things. Okay, I want to focus on the two companies that actually featured female-centric ads. That would be Procter and Gamble, an ad about Olay, and then Microsoft, who was talking about the first female coach for the 49ers. So I was digging a little bit about both these companies. Let me just tell you this: Procter and Gamble, 5 out of 12 directors are women, which is a very high number. And 3 out of 5 of the top 5 executives at the company are women, which is basically unheard of. So Procter and Gamble actually has women in leadership. They're not greenwashing you. They are not pretending they give a shit about women. So I'm giving you props, Procter and Gamble.
You just made me feel good.
Yeah, and the same goes to Microsoft. It looks like they're just trying to make it look like they're good people, but 5 out of 13 directors are women. 40% of top executives are women. So these are actually companies who have women in leadership and are rightfully proud of it. But that's all I can say, because the halftime show, I don't want to get too deep into it, but it just seemed like
there was a lot of crotch sparkling in the halftime show.
It seemed like a crying stripper pole to me.
It was a little bit. I mean, like they did sandwich women in power. The gooey center of the women empowerment sandwich of ads happened to be a 50-year-old pop star grinding up against a rando dude who was rapping. I mean, it was a little bit.
Yeah, it's really favoring those 53% of fans who aren't women. So let's go on to big data. The ads out of big data. Microsoft. I just said we featured an ad on women. Believe it or not, Facebook, Google, Amazon, all featuring big ads. I guess this is no surprise. These are the four of the biggest companies in the world. You got anything to say here?
Well, I did see that, like, there was a story about Facebook saying they were going to be more honest.
Yeah,
he's gonna that they were gonna. Mark Zuckerberg just came out at like some conference and was like, "Our honesty is going to piss some people off."
Essentially, yeah, that they're going to stand for free speech and encryption, even if it pisses people off, because Zuck is, of course, a fighter for the First Amendment.
I love when they twist it to be, I'm a free speech First Amendment advocate.
We can get a Facebook later in the week, but that's what the whole company's becoming a big pretzel twist. It's just,
but all of them did seem like it does feel like, sports brought to you by big tech is a thing, right?
It is, but also big tech is the thing. It's like it represents 17% of the total value of the S&P 500. It's the world. It's our thing. It's what it is.
Yeah, no, it just makes me uncomfortable. Like,
Yeah.
It's like, especially when you see the Facebook ad where their tagline is "more together," and all I can think is, shouldn't this company just be called Mark Book? I mean, it's a fake public company. Why do we stand for this?
Shout out to
Google's
the
the same
great state
thing.
of Shout out to the great state of Maine, where I live. Our beloved author Stephen King made a splash this weekend by deleting his Facebook account and telling everyone to get rid of Facebook. So yeah,
Did he have a lot of followers, or?
Stephen King, come on, he's a little bit famous. Let's get on to let's get out of the Super Bowl. We got to get out of this show. I'll keep it under 30 minutes. I'm just going to tell you some of the headlines we are looking at for the week. Do you want to heart me into this, or should I just do it?
I'll just, it's cutting room floor, baby.
Brexit is done, as the UK has finally left the EU. As Matt just pointed out, Zuck said the social media company is going to stand for free speech and encryption, even if it pisses people off. Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, and Alphabet are all trillion-dollar companies now, thanks largely to services and cloud businesses. The S&P 500 is losing yet another female CEO, so they're going to be down to 27 soon, as Ginny Rometty is leaving IBM. Boeing disclosed it was being investigated by the SEC over the 737 MAX accidents. And finally, the Air Asia Group CEO and the chair will both step down. Well, no, they'll step aside for 2 months while the airline and authorities investigate allegations Airbus paid a bribe of $50 million to win plane orders from the company. That's all I got, Matt.
The only thing worth mentioning on that last story is it is nice to see in a duopoly how Boeing waited 1.5 years to actually do anything about its board. And Airbus at least had the sense to say, okay, you two guys can no longer be involved for a couple of months. Just relax yourselves.
Right.
This was Business Pants. We hope you like our new, shorter, more succinct, not succinct Matt format. Please subscribe, rate us. Go subscribe to Market Medium. Tomorrow's ESG show will be on Market Medium. And tell your friends. Thanks to our team here, the two Courtneys, Dan Rogachnig, John Walsh on art, Todd Hovanek and the Asset Clowns on our music. And thanks to you, Damien, for powering your way through some sort of illness, some nondescript illness.
My own personal coronavirus.
I am glad to call you my co-host. I will see you tomorrow.
All right, see you.